All right. Well, we were having such a nice conversation. That's wonderful. So we're on part 23 or chapter 23 or section 23 called Discrimination Leads to Detachment. Right? What's another title for that? Discrimination leads to attachment. That could also be truth leads to oneness. That could be another alternative. That would mean the same thing. Or discernment leads to freedom. That's another one. Discrimination leads to detachment. This is a very important teaching, especially if you grew up Christian or around Christianity, because Christianity is still holding kind of a space that there's something good out there that's worth desiring, but that you have to literally sacrifice it to God, like it has a value, and you have to sacrifice it to God. And so that leaves this certain, what that does is it puts in us a certain, empathy for desire. We're like, oh, yes, that was a beautiful car, but I gave it up, had to walk away from it. Yeah. And they face the world as if there are things out there worth chasing or that are beautiful and enjoyable to have. But yet we kind of, out of service to God, we have to let go of it. But this is a much more satisfying teaching, and I think this is the true teaching of Jesus, actually, is that there's nothing out there worth having. That there's only one thing worth having, and that's this truth, this knowledge of self, of what you are and who you are, and that the practice of discernment isn't a practice of renunciation in the sense of giving up something that has a value. That this discernment inside, this discrimination, as we call it, also trying to see what is real and what is not real, will cause you to drop things, just to let go of them. That's mature renunciation. The other renunciation of kind of having to force a let go, there's a place for that, but that's not the main. That's not what renunciation looks like in truth. That's what happens when you've got a habit or an attachment or a cycle of thinking that's deeply lodged in you. And even though you've discerned the worthlessness of that particular object or that particular desire, still that habitual cycle continues, and you can't, because it's not a matter of reason, it's not a matter of logic, it's not even a matter of actually wanting something anymore. It's a matter of having an established pattern of thought that you can't, that just runs on despite your reasoning, despite your logical thinking. And so this is where we're going. This having a discernment inside that leads toward freedom, that lets us let go of things because we realize they are not the thing we're looking for, that they are just shiny and are reflecting the thing we're looking for. And so this is that practice of discernment, going in and seeing what is real, poking at things in your mind to find out if they're real or not. And it's very effective for gaining some inner strength and some inner momentum, and for being very encouraging, because it leads you to truth. It leads you to something that's has been obvious but not apparent, or has been apparent but not obvious. I can't remember now which one it is. Anyway, there it is. So Maharaj Sri Nisargadatta says, "You are all drenched, for it is raining hard. In my world, it is always fine weather. There is no night or day, no heat or cold. No worries beset me there, nor regrets. My mind is free of thoughts, for there are no desires to slave for." All right, so he's talking about an enlightened self, right? A self that isn't identified with the mind. And so when there's no identification with the mind, right? When there's no identification with mind, what does the mind look like? Well, there's no weather. It's just, it's like LA. When I moved to LA, people are like, "Oh, the weather's so beautiful there." And I said, "No, that's the wrong understanding. LA has no weather." It's just always the same. You wake up and it's sunny. So it's not good weather because they don't have icy winters to compare it to. So there's just no weather in LA. And so in the mind, there's no weather. There's no storms of moods, no storms of desire, no storms of anger, no, cold fronts of jealousy. There's just no weather there because there's nothing disturbing it. There is no night or day, right? That's a way of saying that it's outside of time. It's outside of time. The first thing that I think in my mind, that Mother put in my mind when I see that no night or day, the practice of fasting kind of gives you a semblance of that. Like if you fast for say like 3 days, and you just don't eat, you don't eat, so you don't stop for meals, and suddenly you kind of instantly are outside of society because everybody else is going to the lunchroom. You're not. Everybody else is going home to dinner. You're not. Everybody's getting up and having their coffee and their Danish. You're not. And so it gives you this sense of removal immediately from the flow of natural life in the world. And then if you take that time and instead of going and getting food for your body, which this is what real fasting is not just not eating. Real fasting is just a switch of eating. It's not going to feed the body, but it's going to the shrine instead of to the dinner table to feed the self, to feed your truth, to feed your understanding of yourself. And so you go to the shrine. And going to the shrine, you're then physically removed from the world around you, from the flow of things around you. So this no night or day is just a removal from the automatic flow of life that everybody else has submitted to and no longer thinks about and just sees it as a necessary part of being. So there's this no night and no day. There's no heat or cold. What does that mean? That means there's no identity with body. If you're removed from the mind, there's no identity with the body. And so its conditions don't disturb your mind, don't disturb you, right? It doesn't disturb the mind because there's no attachment. Attachment is the only thing that disturbs mind, right? That's why if there's suffering, somewhere there's an attachment. And so when you suffer, go attachment hunting. Don't dwell in the suffering. Don't wallow in the suffering. Go hunting. Pick up your sword of discrimination, and wrap it around your chest and put on your thongs of scripture and your thinking cap of God, and get out there in the woods of the world and find out, where is the suffering coming from? Where's the attachment? And get in there and find it. Get in there and find it, discern it, look at it closely, and kill it. Don't eat it though. So there's no day or night, no heat or cold. No worries beset me there, right? No worries, because there's no future. Future is what causes worries, right? The notion, having an idea of a future, is what causes you to worry. So in the realized mind, since he's outside of time, there's no attachments and there's no sense of tomorrow. There's only isness as the truth is. Through discernment, that's an easy one to see. Have you ever been anywhere but now and here? No. And so that shows you there that those things are merely concepts. So no worries. And so there's no future, no regrets. What's he saying there? There's no past. Regrets come only from the past. So he's telling us that in the realized self, there's no weather, right? There's no trouble. There's no night or day. There's no rhythm, no automatic thinking, no patterns of life, no required behaviors, no politeness and rudeness, no heat or cold. The body is what it is. It's coming and going in its time. It's accepted as it is. No troubles. There's no identity with it. You don't base any ideas of yourself off of its condition. No worries. There's no future, nothing to plan for, nothing to worry about coming. No regrets. There's no past that defines what I do in this moment. There's no stories that define what I am in this moment. I'm absolutely free and infinite. My mind is free of thoughts because there is no disturbance. There is no me or mine in the mind. And there are no desires to slave for. So you are infinitely available to everything in the moment. And in that is ecstasy. In that is your true nature. So for some reason, the questioner, let me turn on the muting. How's that for a way of saying it? I'm going to turn on the muting now. And if you want or need to say any, actually, if you just want to do an interpretive dance with the muting off, that's fine. You're totally welcome to do anything you'd like. So no desires to slave for. Having a desire is slavery, right? That's the funny thing, because American freedom, the freedom, the freedom that carries a flag and puts bumper stickers on your car, that's a freedom to fulfill desire. And we think, oh, I'm free to do what I want. This is America, and that's, as we can see, that's the worst of slavery. That's the worst form of slavery, because you don't know your masters. You're enslaved, but you don't know who you're enslaved to. And so that's this notion, I remember I told you that one time where I was, just renouncing one part of my body as I was cleaning myself in the morning and, shampooing my hair. I'm not the hair. So I was really getting the idea of what hair was and separating my sense of self from it. Washed my face, went on all my body parts all the way, just understanding I'm not this, and identifying the touch and seeing that it was other from me, that it's not me, that I have to become aware of it, so that by definition is not me. And so I'd gone out and I was toweling off and I was standing out there and I felt this wonderful elation of just unattachment, being detached in that moment, a wonderful freedom. And then the first thought that my mind comes up with, what do you want to do? You're absolutely free. What do you want to do? And I thought, wow, look at that. How wily that whole arrangement is. You come to a moment of such blissful freedom, and the first thing the mind wants is a desire. What do you want to do? How are you going to express this freedom of yours? How are you going to manifest freedom? Well, freedom is not manifested. Freedom is exactly the opposite. It's the unmanifest. It's our nature, So this is the where he's at. So it's interesting now, because the questioner comes and says, are there two worlds? Which is sort of the same idea, He's described this beautiful mind, this beautiful state, and he's asking, are there two worlds? Because obviously this guy's in another world. He's like, there's no day or night, there's no weather, no regrets, no worries. So Maharaj says, your world is transient and changeful. So there are two worlds, He's saying your world and the world, right? The reality and your reality. But it's different, right? It's your world is transient and changeful. That means that your world is based on your thinking. That world is based on your thoughts. You define your day by your thoughts about it. You define your body by your thoughts about it. You define who you are by your thoughts about it, right? Very rarely do we define anything with silence. So your world is transient and changeful. As long as we're living in mind and identifying ourselves with thoughts, then we live in this world that's transient and changeful. We're going to see the transient mind with all of its moods and states, and we're going to see the transient body and its health and its sickness, its life and its death. He says, my world, the world that he's inhabiting, is perfect and changeless. Okay, and this is what we're talking about. Both of those exist within us. So they're not really two worlds. They're two perspectives of the same world, right? One world, in one perspective, you're identified with the changing. You've placed yourself into it, right? And in the other world, the world of the shrine, if you stand in the shrine of the heart and not in the shrine of the mind, if you stand in the shrine of the heart, you're not in the world. You're observing the world. And through discernment from that position, you come to understand that the world is within you, that you're looking at it through the mind, and the mind is within you. You are not within the mind. It's very much like learning to see that you are dreaming while you're dreaming. If you can understand that you're dreaming while you're dreaming, then you know that the whole dream world is within your own mind, that you're not a character in the dream world, but the dream itself is within you, the dreamer. Right? And so he's talking about that. His world is perfect and changeless. You can tell me what you like about your world. I shall listen carefully, even with interest. Yet not for a moment shall I forget that your world is not, that you are dreaming. Right? So he understands immediately. It's like, yes, I'll be interested. I can be interested in my dream and still know that I'm dreaming. But it's a very different interest, right? It's a very different interest. And the story of the dream becomes a very different story. And you're not affected by the particulars of the dream. It's the dream as a whole that is interesting. You know, the dream as a collection of self, which is interesting. So he lives in the shrine of the heart, perceiving the mind, perceiving the body, and knowing himself to be external to, as it were, external to time, external to cause and effect, external to mind and to body. And so that gives him that universal detachment. So he can be interested, but because his power of detachment matches his power of detachment, he can pull out when he wants to. He doesn't get stuck in there. And that's what Vivekananda says is the purpose of our practice, of our religion, of our philosophy, is that it's to teach us, to teach us what? To give us the ability to attach as strongly as we can detach, or to detach as readily as we attach, so that our powers of attachment and detachment are equal. That's the ideal. Not that detachment rules and we become lumps on a log, but that we've mastered attachment so that we can detach and attach at will. So that when we're reaching to somebody who is dreaming, somebody who is having trouble and suffering in the world, that's a time for attachment. That's a time to draw up close next to them and to be with them. Not to try and fix it, not to try and repair it or do something there, because that's not really what they're looking for. The problem doesn't really exist. They're just that being with them, that empathy with them, that connection with them, that understanding with them, that weeping with them is quite often all that's necessary, right? And then when you leave the room, boom, you're detached. You understand. You don't bring it out of the room with you. You don't let it affect a mood. You don't identify with the mood or the things of it, right? So you can sit and listen carefully, even with interest, and yet not for a moment forget that it's not your world, that it's a story, and it's this person's story, and that condition is that person's condition, right? And so, and know that you are dreaming. And so that prevents you from being caught in the dream or caught in that person's dream, which is more the danger these days. We get caught in other people's dreams. The way that we hook into other people's dreams is like watching the evening news. that's hooking into somebody else's dream, right? And believing it, becoming all worked up about it, and not doing anything in your locality. That's the dream. The antidote to that, it's still a dream, but it's a better dream, a more helpful dream, is to go outside and be in your town, be in your village, and connect with the people next door to you and get to know your neighbors. That's the world you live in, not the world of the evening news. And that's the world you can affect. So if the evening news is, showing a world of divisiveness, go outside, connect with your neighbors, go get them a cookie and bring them by and say, I forgot to tell you for the last 15 years that I like you as my neighbor. Here's a cookie. And see, you've changed your world with a cookie. That world that's coming to you through the evening news, you can't do anything about it. You're just going to suffer through it. So this is a wonderful ability that he is describing to us. And it's a wonderful one to practice until we can see it ourselves. So the questioner says, well, what is it that distinguishes your world from mine? Maharaj, my world has no characteristics by which it can be identified. What's he saying there? He's saying his world is a oneness, right? It's a oneness. It's a mirror. How do you describe a mirror? You can only describe a mirror by what it's reflecting or of its nature as reflection, right? And so this world is a mirror. It's like that. You know, that this world, he knows it to be a mirror. And if you look at a mirror knowing that it's a mirror, you know that the mirror is not changing. Even though you can see movement in it, it's not changing. Even though you can see violence in it, you're not, it's not violent. It's that the nature of the mirror is this unmoving reflection. And so he says, my world has no characteristics by what it can be defined. My world, I understand that everything that I can possibly experience is only a reflection of what I am. Right. And so he sits in this knowing. So it has no characteristics by which it can be identified because I have not separated myself from the whole thing. I know that the whole thing was within me and that this apparent mash of colors and sensations is a reflection only of that. So I don't see the changing. I see only the mirror. I see only the mind, right? The mind is our mirror. My world has no characteristics by which it can be identified. You can say nothing about it. There's no cause and effect in it. There's only this moment, right? That's what he's trying to tell you. There's only this moment. How are you going to describe this moment without applying a memory, without applying baggage to it? You can't describe this moment. This moment cannot be grabbed. You can't isolate it. You can't define it. This moment it's insane, actually. This moment, if you try and understand this moment and what this moment is, you're going to become very spiritual. That's what's going to happen. You're going to become extremely spiritual and you'll begin to believe only in the divine and in nothing else. That's the nature of this moment. And you can see all of the lies that your mind, all of the stories, let's put it that way. So lies sound malicious. All of the stories that your mind can tell you about this moment. But when you hear the mind tell you something about this moment, that's a wonderful opportunity for some discernment, for some discrimination. Look at that. The mind has described something that's not describable. How did it do that? Let's go look and see. It took some sensations. It took a few memories. It took a few habits. It took a few assumptions, mixed them all together, and told me about the moment. But none of that was the moment. All of that was a mixture of everything else. So you can say nothing about my world. I am my world. That's that absolute acceptance. There's no resistance because everything in his world is sourced within himself. He knows there's not two people in his world. There's only the isness, right? My world is myself. It is complete and perfect. Every impression is erased. That means there's no holding on. Impressions come from attachment, right? Impressions come from habit, from repetition. So every impression is erased, every experience rejected, not in a pushing against it, but in a removing of its reality. An experience can only happen when you're not at one with the moment, right? Think of the movie frames. If you are in the current movie frame that's being shown at this, it's 27 of them in a second. So 1/27th of a second is real, right? And you see that frame and there's no change there. There's no story there. There's no movie there. There's just a still picture on the screen. So if you slowed a movie way down, it would just be like a slideshow. Chick, chick, right? One after the other. But there would be no movement if you slowed it down. There'd be no identity with it and no separateness. no movement, right? What causes movement is it shows you a frame, you hold that frame in your mind, memory, and then the new moment comes, the new frame comes, you compare the two and they're not the same. And the mind is like, oh my God, my ego self is under attack. I have no existence. How do we explain this? Movement. Okay. So I'll raise the illusion of movement to explain this moment. And then suddenly you've got the whole movie, and you've got all of the stories and all the hypnotization going on. So this power of being present is the power of a silent mind. It's the ability to experience the moment as it is and not as anything else is telling you that it is. Right? So he says, it's complete and perfect. Every impression is erased. I have completely forgotten the previous frame. I'm not using thought and memory to define myself and place in the world. Every experience rejected, it dissolves like a raindrop into the water. It just dissolves into the water. I need nothing, not even myself. For myself, I cannot lose. Right? There is this isness that's separate from time. If you have this experience for a moment, if you can approach no thought for a moment, that's one of the first ahas that happens. Time disappears. Time disappears. If you have a great meditation where the mind is very quiet, you'll sit there and you'll think only 5 minutes has passed, and you'll come out of it and look at the clock and an hour and a half has passed. You're like, oh my God, that was crazy. I wish all my meditation was like that. That was almost painless. How great. So these are things that are true in you right now. It's just a matter of pulling your perspective out of mind and placing it in the shrine room of the heart, where you can watch the mind as an observer. I need nothing, not even myself. For myself, I cannot lose. Not even God, the questioner asks. Here's the big one. Not even God, as he's picking up a stone to throw at him. Maharaj, all these ideas and distinctions exist in your world, right? God is just an idea and a distinction. Think about it. What do we know of God? We throw that word around as if we know what it means, as if it has a meaning. The meaning of God, the true meaning of God, is transcendent to meaning, right? So if it means something to you, you don't understand it because it's beyond all of that. So he says, all of these ideas and distinctions, they exist in your world, right? In mine, there is nothing of the kind. My world is single and very simple. There's one person, one being, right? One being, just like a dream. There's one being in the dream. There's one being that is the dream. And if you know that, then you know the dream. You know the nature of the dream. And you know in the dream, there's no past in a dream. There's no cause and effect in a dream, right? It'll mimic it sometimes, but it's just a mimic. Why? Because nothing's actually happening in the dream. And that is the magic behind Thakur's claim or statement that you are not the doer. Why are you not the doer? Well, because you're in a dream. You can build a house if you want to. There's no house there. You know, you can walk 1,000,000 miles if you want to, but there's no movement there. A dream is a dream. It's unreal. And so this is how we know that we're not the doer. You know, look at the world. The world's been going on for thousands of years. How many houses have we built? And yet how many houses are there? You see, everything falls back into the stuff it came from. Every image of the mind falls back into the mind, right? So it's not real. So everything is singular and very simple. Just come into the moment. You don't have to solve any problems. It was the imagination that created the problem, and it's letting go of the imagination that will solve the problem. Be where you are now and manifest your nature in that. Allow your nature to manifest, right? And that will happen naturally if you don't get caught up in thinking, caught up in stories, caught up in sensations. So the questioner, nothing happens there? Maharaj, whatever happens in your world, only there it has validity and evokes response. In my world, nothing happens. Nothing happens. Now, it's interesting that he says nothing happens in his world, but he's observing a changing world. He's able to communicate with the changing world. So he's observing change. He's observing story, but he's not for a moment becoming unaware that he's not part of it, that it's nothing more than a dream, right? A reflection of the world, of of the place he inhabits, right? So he can see it, he can function in it, he can observe it, but he never for a moment thinks that it's him or that he's in it. He always understands this is within me, right? He never forgets the presence. He never forgets the I am. He's always aware of that first and foremost. So for those who are bhaktas or devotional folks, that's the way to see this teaching. He never forgets the I am, and the I am is the divine. So he never forgets that he's of the nature of love and is inundated by love. He never forgets that he is of the nature of wisdom and that he is inundated with wisdom. And in a sense, in the true sense, when the mind stops, it's hard to say it, he becomes the noun of wisdom, the noun of love, the noun of being, of existence, right? When there's no change, there's no verb. So there's no ing on the end of those. I guess there isn't anyway. Wisdom, existence, and bliss. There's no ing there. Well, there's a reason for that. The true state is a state of no change. Established in this, you observe the world, right? In my world, nothing happens. Questioner, the very fact of your experiencing your own world implies duality inherent in all experience. Maharaj, verbally, yes. Right? And it's important that he makes that distinction, because to use language, you make many assumptions. And that's why Thakur always emphasizes Brahman is the one thing that has not been stained by the tongue, because none of the assumptions that are necessary for language are real. So if you can think about something, it is not real, right? Because thinking is language. Language requires subject, object, and verb, right? Language requires past, present, future. Language requires memory. Language requires a story, as it were. So all of the assumptions, just for saying something, are assumptions that are not helpful to truth. This is why you need to shut the mind up. Because anything that causes thought is not a valid assumption for the nature of being, for the nature of what we are actually non-experiencing. Right? So this is our trouble, where we insist on language for our learning and our knowing, and yet the assumptions that are necessary for language to exist are not real, are not true. And so we immediately put ourselves into a treadmill. So verbally, yes. I am experiencing a duality which is inherent in experience. Verbally, yes. But your words do not reach me. This is another very important hint. Your words do not reach me. Okay? Which means that the self does not change. For a word to reach you, you have to be changed by the word. Right? For a thought to reach you, you have to be changed by the thought. For the body to reach you, you have to be changed by the body. So this reaching is only done through attachment. But it's not the body reaching you, it's you reaching the body, as it were. Right? So attachment is what tangles us up and makes us feel and experience the world directly, so that our health affects us, so that our coldness affects us, our mood affects us. But through non-attachment, through discernment and understanding that these things cannot touch you, they cannot reach you, which is why that scripture in the Bhagavad Gita, you cannot be wedded, you cannot be burned, all these distinctions of the self, that the distinctions of the self are not valid. All right. But your words do not reach me. Mine is a nonverbal world, for the exact reason that we just talked about. If you're thinking about something, you're already in a state of delusion, because the assumptions that you're making in order to use language to think about something are incorrect, right? And so this is that knowing. Mine is a nonverbal world. In your world, the unspoken has no existence, right? In our world, if you can't say it, it's not there. If you can't feel it, it's not there. If you can't experience it, it's not there. Mine is a nonverbal world. In your world, the unspoken has no existence. In mine, the words and their contents have no being. In your world, nothing stays. In mine, nothing changes. My world is real. Yours is made of dreams. Made of dreams, made of memories, which don't exist, don't have any existence, made of stories, which are arbitrary and created from random attachments that you've made, decisions about things that your body and mind liked or didn't like, right? And so you're pulled into a narrative. You're pulled into a verbal world. And this is exactly that interesting distinction. You look at Jesus. What is Jesus composed of? I am the Word, right? He was a manifestation of Word. What is Word? Word is verbal. Jesus is the highest perfection in the world of in the verbal world, in the world of change, right? The world of subject-object relationship. So the Word, once it's spoken, takes on this world. This world is the Word, right? It's the manifestation. It's the vibration. It's the changing. It's the thinking mind. That's what it is. Synonym with the disturbed or thinking mind. Disturbed because you placed the distinction of me and mine in that mind. And so you live in a verbal world, which is naturally dual and naturally full of narratives. But at the same time, but from the perspective of being in the dual world, in the thought world of verbal, the silent world doesn't exist, because we've chosen to live in the world of verbs, subjects, and objects. And so silence is negated. But in reality, the silence is just as necessary. If you didn't have the silence between your words, there'd be no words. There'd just be one long sound. So silence is what enables the song. Space or emptiness is what enables the furniture. And so you can live a life conscious of one of those two things, conscious of the furniture and the songs, which is the world of change, or conscious of the silence and space, silence and emptiness, which is the source or the matrix which allows everything else, but is not defined by it. It always returns to silence, always returns to emptiness, right? So the verbal world comes out of the silent, empty world. And within you are both of those worlds. And the one you identify with is the one that you will live in. Yeah, of course that's not true, because I said it. Because the world he's living in is nonverbal, so I can't put it in a sentence to compare it to the verbal one, right? And therein lies the difficulty of realization. We're trying to, because we live in the verbal world, we want the answer to our problem. But the answer to our problem isn't words and can't be described. And so we're constantly looking for that sentence, and we can't find that sentence. Right? So he says, my world is real and yours is made of dreams. And the questioner says, and yet we're talking. You know, we're talking. So if you're in an unchanging world and I'm in the dream, how is this happening? We're talking. And he says, the talk is in your world. The talk is in your world. In mine, there is eternal silence, right? So he's not even identified with the sounds coming out of that particular body. He sees the sound coming from emptiness, and he's identified with the emptiness, not the words, right? So he's watching even now. He's not the one conversing. He's not the one talking. He is observing a response to you because you put it out. You have a sense of me in mind, and he's in the same universal mind, and he's seeing you as a disturbance in that universal mind. And he's seeing the words emanating from him in relationship to that disturbance in the universal mind. But he's understanding that it's a dream, that it's a thought. There is no substance to a thought without identification. A thought only has substance when you identify with it, when you give it your sentience, when you split with it your love, existence, and being, love, existence, and wisdom. So the talk is in your world. In mine, there is eternal silence. My silence sings. My emptiness is full. I lack nothing. You cannot know my world until you are there, because it's not a world of sensations. It's not a world of distinctions. And it is not a world that can be talked about or described, because it's not composed of the elements of dreaming. Right? Questioner, it seems that you're alone in your world. Maharaj, how can you say alone or not alone when words do not apply? Of course, I am alone, for I am all. So in the dream, you're alone, right? In the dream, you are the only one that's real. Everything else is coming out of you. And yet, do you experience loneliness? Not at all. You enjoy the everything. You enjoy the all. Right? How can you say alone or not alone? Because there is no separation. I don't see myself as a concept. I don't see myself as a story. I don't see myself as a body. I don't see myself as a set of conditions. I myself am all. I am in the silent. I'm in the silent space between your words. I'm in the empty space between your objects. I'm not in the objects. I'm not in the sounds. Are you ever coming into our world? What is coming and going to me? These are again are words. I am. Whence am I to come from? And where am I to go? I am. I am existence itself. Right? I am what gives everything reality. I'm not the things. I exist in the silence and the emptiness that allows all of everything to be. But that's who I am. I am. Nothing more. Not one more adjective can be added to that. And that's where we just go in every moment. Just be in every moment. Understand everything that you think is happening. Everything that you think is an experience is merely a thought. Merely a thought. And it's only your identity with that thought as a descriptor of you that gives it power. Otherwise, a thought remains a thought. It rises, exists, and disappears. That's it. Are you ever coming into our world? What is coming and going to me? These again are words. I am. Whence am I to come from and where to go? Questioner. this guy is this guy's a hard nut to crack, man. He's not hearing anything. Of what use is your world to me? Again, for something to have a use, it has to be separate from you. And for it to have a use, it must fulfill a lack or a desire. You see, so he's making all the same assumptions and coming up with yet another question, which is the same question he's been asking over and over again and again from different ways. He won't bust out of this notion of the verbal world that he lives in or that they inhabit. You should consider more closely your own world. Examine it critically, and suddenly one day you will find yourself in mine. Right? So he's like, stop asking all these questions about my world. You can't understand them because the assumptions you're making to ask the questions are wrong. It's the very room that you're standing in that won't allow you to see the outdoors. You can sit there and ask me all these questions you want while I'm standing outdoors, but it's not going to make any sense to you, because the room you're living in doesn't have any trees, doesn't have a stream, doesn't have deer, doesn't have anything in it. So instead of asking all these questions about my world, step into it. That's what he's saying. Move your point of perspective. You have a choice within yourself. Be in the mind and believe it to be real and listen to what it tells you and suffer accordingly. Or be in the heart, observe the mind and discern and carefully, and you'll understand it cannot reach you. That the dream loses its power over you once you know that it's a dream. This world is the same. This world. And at death, when the body drops, that's going to be an amazing moment for you, especially as a seeker, especially as someone with a notion of truth, because that body's going to drop off and you're still going to be. And of course, if you have a pure mind, your first thought will be Satchitananda. If you have an impure mind, your first thought will be, what the hell? You're like, oh my God, what is this? The body dropped, right? And that's when the grace of Thakur is going to swoop in and carry you off, like a lamb in Jesus's arms. It's like all is well. You're going to realize, oh my God. And that's realization at death. Because what? Because suddenly you know it all to be true. Suddenly you realize the body's dead. I just left it wherever I just left it. And I'm still very much in existence. I'm still very much here, wherever that is. And so then realization happens because everything will fall into place and you won't have a mind in the sense of memory and thought. Anyway, if I say any more, I'm just an idiot. I don't know anything about it. I'm just grabbing disparate pieces of information and sort of articulating that. So consider closely your own world. That's our job. Consider closely. Don't wonder about what it's like to be realized. Wonder more about, why do I enjoy being not realized? Why am I so attached to not realizing? Right? Because it's only your attachment to not realize. That's why Mother says, again, I remind you, you can have your freedom in this moment if you want it. You can have your realization right now. God is not withholding it from you. There are not any circumstances or conditions that you haven't reached that are necessary for it, because it exists already. That's why it's realization. It's already here. All you have to do is to let go of your identity with mind and identify with isness in the shrine of the heart. Become an observer of everything. You should consider more closely your own world. Examine it critically. Watch, look, see, learn, understand. Your desires never give you what you want. If they did, you would have been sated long ago. Right? The desires cannot give you anything. You come into the world empty-handed, and how are you going to leave the world? Empty-handed. So getting falls off the table right away. Obviously, the point of life is not to get something, because you would have to be born with it, or you would be able to take it out with you, right? There's nothing to be gotten here. Examine it critically, and suddenly one day you will find yourself in mine, in this world, the world of that has always been within you, but didn't exist because it wasn't verbal and couldn't be described in a thought. And you, unfortunate for ourselves, have identified yourself with that mind. And so, being in that mind, you cannot describe the other world, big quotes, the other world that exists within you. Right? What do we gain by it? Again, see, not letting go of the definition of you see, I mean, he's all of these questions that the questioner is asking are exactly the same question. And the point is that the assumptions that are necessary for each one of these questions are what Sri Nisargadatta in each question is trying to negate, trying to say, stop it. Stop thinking about things as necessary, as useful, as a means of gain or getting or grabbing or understanding, or, you know, every question requires the same assumptions. And the assumptions are what is wrong. The assumptions are our delusion. That is the fundamental. It doesn't matter what question you're asking. It doesn't matter what questions you have for God. It doesn't matter. What matters is the assumptions that are necessary for forming that question. And so what he's saying here is this discernment is about that. It's not about the thoughts that that you think about in answering your question. It's not the anticipation of a new idea or a new object or a new verb or a new anything. The point of spiritual life isn't answers to the questions in that sense. The answers to spiritual life is stop with the question and look at the question and ask yourself, what am I assuming that is causing this question? That's where you're going to find God. That's where you're going to find your true nature. That's where realization happens. Because you realize the assumptions you're making to ask the question are the delusion. That's why he says, do you not see it is your quest for happiness itself that prevents you from being happy? Because your first assumption in searching for happiness is that you don't have it. All right, that's your first assumption. And so don't get caught up in the questions and answers. That's why they say this isn't going to happen as a matter of thought or philosophy or insight. This is going to happen in the absence of all of it. This is because this is the initial happening, the happening with no cause. And so we've got to get to that, to the happening with no cause, which is being present in the moment. Same way of saying it. This moment is the happening with no cause. Right? What do we gain by it? You gain nothing. That's the whole point. You haven't gained anything with anything you've grabbed so far. When you leave this world, it's all going to be here. No matter how many castles you built in your dream last night, you woke up in the same place you went to bed in. And so this is life. So you gain nothing. You leave behind what is not your own and find what you have never lost. Oh, this is beautiful poetry. Oh, God. Ooh, that's so beautiful. You leave behind what is not your own. This is so beautiful because this world is not your own. It's not what you want. It's not what you're looking for. It's not going to give you the answers to your made up questions. You leave behind what is not your own and find what you have never lost. That internal peace of perfect contentment. That place you had to assume did not exist in order to enter into the world of the mind. You had to forget that you were God to go eat the fruit of the tree that told you you would be like God. Understand? So look very closely at that. You leave behind what is not your own, and you find what you have never lost, your own being. Your own being. All right. And we're going to stop there.